Okay, so good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. This morning we've got actually a kind of a full agenda, but we're going to start with a presentation from the Office of Homeland Security folks. They're doing a critical infrastructure project, and it will impact you folks both on the GIS side and the emergency management side to a certain degree. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michael Covert, one of the consultants working on the project. Michael?
Awesome. Thank you for being here, everybody. I am on John Shear's team with Ready Zone HQ. And as Arthur mentioned, we are working on a critical infrastructure resilience project with Office of Homeland Security. My colleague, John Shear, is also here on the line. He's going to be providing a briefing for you today. So without further ado, I will turn it over to him to share what we're working on with you guys. John, go ahead.
Yeah, and before we get going, we actually have Jimmy Collins on the line too. So Jimmy, I don't know if you wanted to just start off with kind of any opening comments about what we're going to cover today. We've got about 15 minutes with you, and then we've got about 5-10 minutes for questions, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, I'll make it really brief. So John's group, excuse me, is working with our office to develop a program for critical infrastructure security and resilience. Our office is charged with security and protection of critical infrastructure across the state. And so in addition to organizing the programmatics for that, we're looking at developing a common operating picture, as we're calling it. And that is a portion of the work that John's team is helping us get organized. So he'll describe that in the presentation, and then I look forward to any questions or thoughts that the group might have. So thanks for letting us present. Over to you, John.
Thanks, Jimmy. So here's what we're going to be covering in today's discussion. We'll work through the project overview, as Jimmy mentioned, and we're going to go into some of the things we're really looking for some support from this group, especially when it comes to the sectors that we're going to be focused on initially for this project, the stakeholders that we're engaging. We really feel like we're not necessarily getting all the right people in the room for the discussions that we need to have. That's one of the reasons we're on this call today, is to make sure we're getting additional outreach and getting some input. And that ties into the things that I'm sure all of you have had to deal with when it comes to critical infrastructure data, and talk about some of the challenges that we've been facing, talk about some of the data elements that we're working through, and then get into next steps. So, bottom line is we are going to want to introduce this project to you and, open up lines of communication, especially when it comes to the county level discussions that we're looking to have. We would like to encourage outreach, and if there's anything that kind of jogs your mind and says, oh, this is really something that we're working on right now in Hawaii County or Maui or whatever, that's the kind of stuff we're looking to get some feedback on, and maybe some future discussions for maybe some one-on-one sessions. We are focusing on critical infrastructure. There are different definitions of that. It's not all of the infrastructure within the state that we're looking at. So we really want to make sure we're focusing on the critical infrastructure and key resources. There's, both the national level kind of look at what critical infrastructure is, and then at the state level, there is a critical infrastructure security and resilience program that Jimmy mentioned. The strategy was published back in March, and this is really looking at trying to make sure that we've got a solid list of the critical infrastructure within the state that includes the systems and assets that we're focused on, and not just from a natural hazards perspective. We're really looking at all threats and hazards, and what are the kind of things that we can do to better prepare the state. So the scope of the project is focused on really getting the disparate elements pulled together in one place. This is not meant to be a public-facing system. This is meant to be focused on state planning that needs to take place and supporting things like threat mitigation efforts, maybe potentially, identifying areas of response capabilities and capacity that can be improved, and things like long-term resilience investment planning. The last bullet there is really one of the most important reasons we're on the call today, is we want to make sure that we're synchronizing this effort with the existing projects that are taking place. An example of that is what's going on with the State Energy Office. They've been working on a project for, I believe, a year now. maybe a little longer, focused specifically on the energy sector in on Oahu. And we want to make sure that we're ingesting that information to this project and not, covering the same ground. We know that it can be frustrating for stakeholders to get multiple data requests from the state for the same exact information. And so that's one of the things we're trying to make sure that we're limiting. And we are looking for some assistance, obviously from the people on the call when we do this outreach and have these type of discussions. This is following along with CIS's guidance, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency's Infrastructure Resilience Planning Framework. So that talks about what to do when we're working on critical infrastructure projects like this. We're in the second step of this effort, which is the critical infrastructure identification, and then that'll follow on with things like risk assessment, developing actions, and then implementing and evaluating the program in the future. So where we're at right now is identifying and prioritizing infrastructure. The first step is the identification piece. And then after we've worked through the identification piece, work into prioritization efforts, and then look at things like dependencies and interdependencies within systems. So we're solidly in the middle of that critical infrastructure identification effort. We just started the project back in June. I've only had 2 working group meetings to date. And what we're looking at right now is that increased stakeholder engagement to get feedback and input. We found in other projects that this is one of the most important phases, is to make sure that you're reaching out and don't assume that people know what's being worked on, making sure that you're raising awareness of what's taking place to kind of build momentum moving forward. So the 2 working groups that I mentioned already, one was just a kickoff meeting back in July. I'm not sure if, we basically we're trying to make sure that everybody understood what we had reviewed to date, what the plans and expectations were for the group. There is a project charter that kind of describes that, and a one-pager that we can share after this call that provides a little more context. And then we did, have a plan for surveys, interviews, and documentation that we're collecting moving forward. The second working group was back in August, and then continued to look at things like, what are the specific elements of information that we need to be collecting related to asset identification, data validation, asset prioritization, things along those lines, and then kind of the next steps. We had been planning a workshop in the September timeframe, and then that was, postponed due to the wildfire situation in Maui. And then we've continued. So the next working group that we got lined up is actually not going to take place until November. So what we're looking at in terms of the GIS efforts and where we're looking for support is really looking at the verification of data. We know that there's a ton of lists that are out there. This is a problem set that's been worked on for at least a decade within the state. Is, what is the critical infrastructure within the state? What is the critical infrastructure at the county level? There's a lot of data that needs to be cleaned up, and that's one of the challenges we're facing right now, is to make sure that we're able to pull in the right information that's of most relevance and trying to avoid the duplication of information that's out there. Building on that, we want to make sure that we are able to identify dependencies, interdependencies, and that requires a little bit more than what is in typical information systems that have been collected up. And so if you pull up a data layer that shows, let's say, fire stations, that doesn't really tell you anything except other than the address of that location. So there is some discussion that we're looking for and some feedback about what might be buried in other information that's already been collected. There's been outreach in previous efforts. One of the projects we worked on with HIMA was a facility prioritization tool, where we looked at about 1,200 critical infrastructure facilities in the state and got subject matter expert input that says, this is why this particular facility is important for the board of water supply. This is why it might need temporary power after disaster. So that's the kind of stuff we're looking to gather additional information on. As there has been a lot of work since that time frame over the last 5 years or so to build out these layers, and that could have been work that was done to support hazard mitigation plans. That could have been work that was done for other long-term recovery efforts. But the idea is to making sure that we've got hopefully access to that information to include what's been done down to the county level. And then obviously outreach to existing GIS groups. When we had an opportunity, with author support, to reach out to the groups that are supporting the Maui wildfires, and really had a good discussion about the type of data they're collecting related to critical infrastructure. So the sectors that we're focused on initially, 15 of the 16 critical infrastructure sectors are the focus within the state of Hawaii. What we're looking at is those top 5, what we're calling tier 1, are the energy, transportation, water, wastewater, communications, and information technology. I'll tell you that most of the data sets we've seen do not have really anything on information technology. And so that's one of the things we're looking to get some feedback on is, what is being captured right now when it comes to information technology, what's being shared with decision makers, and what needs to be included. For the energy sector, that's probably the most advanced, just based on the efforts of the State Energy Office, like I said, on that previous effort that's been finishing up now. And then, looking at these other areas, these are challenging efforts when you're talking about what information needs to be collected about the transportation sector, water and wastewater comms at the state level. And then there are some priorities for the next level of sectors that we're going to go into, but the priority for right now and reaching out to stakeholders is almost like a pilot project to get this information in place and then roll out to the next sectors to get the additional information collected. So the stakeholders that we have identified, this is either through previous efforts or recommendations from subject matter experts. We've got almost 100 stakeholders tied to these various sectors. What we're looking for is a handful of these are not tied to specific sectors. That's why the list is not applicable. So like the State Energy Office is cross sectors, and they might not be just focused on energy. And there are other state offices that tend to fall into that category. So what we're looking for is, have we reached the right stakeholders? Are there other ones that we should engage? And this just gives you a feel for what those are by sector. We're continuing to build on this list. Some of these are more engaged than others, but the idea is to invite them to working group meetings to get input from them. Some of these are through breakout sessions. Some of those might be involved in upcoming workshops, and some of them might just be on distribution lists to receive information, to respond to surveys and things along those lines. So once again, if you can look at this list and see that, wow, there's a ton of stakeholders that you might work with in the communications sector that aren't listed here, that's the kind of information we're looking to gather up and make sure we get, hopefully some outreach going. Same type of thing for the transportation sector and then for water and wastewater. The challenges that we're showing here, I don't think is going to be new to anybody in the GIS realm. There's a lot of outdated information, incomplete information, data sets that are really not comprehensive. Maybe they have, Queens Medical Center listed, but no address. It doesn't have anything else. There's no lat long. There's nothing to really pinpoint what that was talking about. Some of them might have, vulnerability or hazard information, but once again, no specific address, so we're not even sure what those are relating to. And so that might have been just an analytical work that doesn't have a unique asset identifier. It makes it really hard to pull in and figure out what that specific critical infrastructure is tied to. You would think that maybe the CISA gateway information will be the solution, but really there's a challenge with the PCI information. That's one of the questions that was in the chat. The protected critical infrastructure information does need to be extracted out. We have that file that does not include that information, but we have found that there's the same type of challenges as in some of the other information where it's missing address information, it's got duplicates, it's got other missing information to include not having point of contact information, maybe even being located in the wrong county. I'm sure you've seen that before, where you've got an address that's in the middle of the ocean. So there's really some of that stuff that's included. And like I mentioned, there's no information technology sector information in there at all. And then there's a couple other sources that we've been, looking at. If you're not familiar, the Idaho National Labs has got an all hazards analysis tool that they use for dependency, interdependency, and hazard modeling. They have some data that they built up focused on Oahu. That's one of the things that we found in years of working in Hawaii is a lot of information is just focused on Oahu and doesn't have information from the neighbor islands. And then that last piece there is the State Energy Office. It does include a little beyond the energy sector stakeholders, some of the basic information like locations of fire stations, police stations, hospitals, things like that, but it's definitely not comprehensive in those other areas that we talked about. And then, like I mentioned, it was only focused on Oahu. So what we're looking for in terms of gaps is, we've found that there tends to be a lot of information out there. You just have to ask. And so this is the ask is, let us know if there's information that already exists that we could have access to, especially for the county sector data that's out there. Maybe that it might be missing some of the data elements that we might need, and so we need to reach out to stakeholders to validate. But the idea is to get that information, and then once we get that information, we would like to go through a data cleaning effort, push right back to the stakeholders and say, hey, this is the information we've got so far. There's 40 different wells that are listed here. Are those the 40 that should be included in the state website or the state critical infrastructure common operating picture, or is there should these be pulled out? So just as an example, we do have basic information that you'll all be familiar with when it comes to this, just name, address, point of contact, sector, subsector elements that we'd be validating. And then there's also sector-specific information we're looking to capture to help with some of that interdependency discussions. So what we're looking for is feedback on what data amounts you've already been collecting. What are the kind of things that help you with your efforts? What are the type of things that you'd recommend that OHS, collect and have visibility on? Some of these are, inside baseball that really don't need to be shared outside of your organization. It's just something you're working on. Others might be of interest when it comes to supporting this type of effort. And then obviously we're looking for, the type of feedback on prioritization efforts and things that could be useful when it comes to, sector specific information. So we are focusing on those 5 sectors. Like I mentioned, there is some guidance that comes from CISA that talks about the type of information that should be captured. And what we're trying to make sure is we're dealing and getting into some of the details of things like this, where it says estimated population served, 1 to 10,000, 10,000 to 50,000, that might not be applicable in Hawaii, especially at the county level. So getting some feedback on what metrics and measurements are of use. So the next steps that we're looking at is requesting assistance with access to those existing shareable, county level data. We know that that might be, currently in a walled off GIS user group. If you could either let us know directly or maybe let Arthur know, hey, here's a set that we really think would be beneficial for this group. And then if there are additional stakeholders or working groups that are, you've met, we've heard that there might be an effort going on in Hawaii County focused on this. And so maybe there's a project meeting we could sit in on, provide some overview, get some context, and then obviously help to assist in getting data from stakeholders so we're not asking them twice. And so if you've already reached out, got information validated from, KIUC, the idea is, all right, well, let's not ask them again if we've already got that data collected. So that's what we wanted to cover this morning. We have some time for questions if there's anything you have, would like to get additional information about.
Great, thanks, John. Any questions from you folks?
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges is we tend to look at a hazard mitigation plan and it says, oh, we've collected information on 2,000 critical infrastructure facilities, but it's trapped in a PDF and then nobody knows where that data resides. And so you might think it's self-evident that that information's out there and available, but a lot of times it's not. And so if you are aware of some of these data sets, we would really appreciate getting some feedback, especially when it comes to some of the work that was done for the hazard mitigation plans, any work that might have been done to support some previous response efforts. And, you're asked from a decision maker saying, hey, can you, provide me with a snapshot of the number of facilities in this area that might have been impacted by an incoming hurricane? That's exactly the kind of stuff we're trying to make sure we're on the same page on. So just to appreciate any kind of input we could get.
Hi, John. Elton on Kauaʻi
Hey, Ellen.
from Kima. Hey, unfortunately, I don't see any of our GIS people on the call. But I like what you're doing. But I did want to relay kind of a recent issue that we're facing. We applied for and will likely be getting some technical assistance via a federal program for a slope stabilization landslide risk study on our North Shore. And in reaching out to close partners in the private sector and public, as far as power, water, telecom, industry seems to be very secretive about releasing their GIS layers or their infrastructure. Maybe because of competition or whatever it is. Like at least one of the main partners, the power company KIUC here, wants us to sign a non-disclosure agreement and is very sensitive about where such data is shared. Is there like a best practice? I mean, maybe OHS can reach out from there and knowing there's a statewide effort or something. Is there a best practice in how we secure or address such concerns?
If you don't mind, John, I'm gonna
Yeah, I was going to
jump
say,
in.
Jimmy, sure, go for it.
Yeah, Elton, hang on. Sorry, I'm just getting over a cold and it just won't go away. Anyway, yes, best practice. That's the Protected Critical Infrastructure Information Program. It's a federal legislation actually that allows us to protect specific kinds of data from use in like PUC filings or lawsuits and that kind of thing. Anyway, it's a protection that can be offered to our critical infrastructure partners so that we can talk about things like vulnerabilities or threats or those types of things. And that's typically where the dominant sensitivities are. So I'd absolutely love to work with you and those partners because if we can provide that to say like a KIUC, then we all can benefit from that. I actually manage the PCII program for our state. And we are looking at where other, I'll call them cleared individuals who've gone through the training and know how to handle that information, how we can get that out to a county level, knowing that you're going to interact and necessarily so with some of those critical infrastructure partners as well. So I'd be happy to talk a bit further about that. In fact, I think we're teeing up that specific topic for a future working group for our critical infrastructure program. And I wanted to definitely, query the counties on where this kind of protection for that kind of information would be also helpful for y'all as well as for our purposes. Over.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Much appreciated. For us, I'd just want to be able to assure the critical infrastructure partner that proprietary or protected information would not get out, such as if we have multiple people wanting to access the layer during a disaster or activation on our end.
Yeah, we can definitely work with you to ensure both where the information resides as well as who has access to it. Can help provide some of those assurances that the owner operators are going to want before they share that kind of information. I will note too, we have put forward a piece of legislation and we expect to reintroduce it this session to get it over the final committee hurdle to provide the same state level protections that the federal government can provide at their level. That would allow us a lot more flexibility in working with our owner operators, if you will, of the critical infrastructure. Since we are actually establishing a GIS platform, if you will, for those purposes at the county and the state level. So this will definitely go kind of hand in hand with all of that development work that we're doing. Over.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Elton. Yeah, KIUC, I believe, has been at least to one or two of our meetings, and HECO, I think, had similar issues where they asked for an NDA before they work with the State Energy Office. So it's not unusual to have that kind of request. The challenge is there's a lot of open source information that's out there. So I think that's our starting point, is to push back the open source information saying, hey, this is what we've collected to date. That's basically the way the Idaho National Lab approaches it. They're saying, hey, we've already collected this stuff up from these sources. Can you validate this? And hopefully they'd be willing to do that and, get engaged in the discussion. We found that, one-pagers tend to help. And then also the assurances you mentioned that this is not meant to be a public portal and that it will be, PCI protected, as Jimmy mentioned. Any other questions? Thanks, Arthur. Appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, thanks, John. Thanks, Jimmy. With that, I'm going to actually rearrange the agenda a little bit to make sure we get the important stuff And so don't know how prepared you are, the counties are. I have you on the agenda, but I didn't really reach out to you individually about giving an update. But I'd like to hear from the counties at this point about what's happening there. So, and I'll call on the GIS folks, since this is a GIS coordinators meeting. So I think Kauaʻi is not represented here, but let's start with city and county. Bertha, or any of your people?
Hi.
May I say something? No, go ahead, Bertha.
Oh, go ahead, Rod. I was just gonna say, I was gonna turn it over to either you or Jim if you folks have anything.
So one of the things we've been doing, we worked with S3 product development on their parcel fabric team. And starting at ArcGIS Pro 2.8, they now support COGO that is geodetic rather than grid, which is the same method that surveyors use. So on surveys, you see the point of beginning and there's a northing and an easting. If you use that with this new technique, and there are a whole bunch of steps to go through, you can get very close to, you can get from one monument to a next. We were able to then do a pilot of 2,000 parcels in Hawaii, getting them, and then using the AGOL view, formerly known as pictometry, to visually QC it. And it looks like it's within about 3 feet, which is, when you see the pictometry shift a little bit in a few places, you realize that you're not going to be able to get it any closer than that. There's a bit of processing to do, and then so people in the city know about this. Obviously, there are other people who try to use the imagery to correct, and this is using the surveyed by a registered land surveyor who has been on the ground and has said, yes, this is the parcel corner, not this is the corner where 2 fences meet or something like that. So it looks pretty good. And we'd like to, to find funding and write it up, the procedures. I'm working on that. And I'd like to present that to this group at some point in time. I hadn't known about this meeting. The other aspect is to give people heads up about, the data is going to move, but we know it's going to move anyway because of the new datum that's coming out. So I just wanted to let you know about that, and maybe with a little advance notice, I could show you something.
Sounds good. Thanks, Rod. Okay, we're gonna, Maui had to drop off. We'll move to Hawaii.
Good morning, everybody. This is Rob Eubank, Director of IT for the County of Hawaiʻi. Anything GIS related, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Eric Lash, who is our GIS manager. So Eric, if you've got some information for us.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Arthur. I'm Eric Lash with the County of Hawaiʻi. We have also been engaged in the parcel fabric here, though we're not yet at the stage that Rod is with ground control on our side. We are looking at a similar approach as Rod has been looking at with AGOL View for visual QC, and then heading on the ground for monument QC, and understanding also that with datum 2025, whatever it's going to be, there are going to be shifts that we'll have to deal with at the same time on our side. We're in the process of undertaking a governance activity for the county where we're going to be looking at the sort of the holistic view of how GIS operates here. And that includes discussions about PCII or the potential for PCII in deliverables and derivatives that are being managed by county GIS staff. Along with our governance activity, we have a planning meeting, a countywide planning meeting coming up in November for our GIS practitioners to kind of get a chance to talk with ESRI and the vendor about their programs and what they may want to do for the upcoming year in those programs.
Great, thanks, Eric. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to Lidar updates. So Joan or Drew, are you on the line? Did you want to give an update on where we are on the Lidar collections?
Hello, this is Drew here. Hopefully you can hear me. Joan, is it okay if I go ahead with this?
Oh, yes, please do. Thanks, Drew.
Okay, you're welcome. Let's see. I'll try to share my screen to show a couple of a few graphics in a Word document. And let's see here. Share my screen. Here it is. There we go. Okay, do you see the image here?
We see it.
Okay, great. So my name is Drew Decker. I'm with the U.S. Geological Survey, and I am a national map liaison. So I work with partners on cooperative base mapping projects. I cover Hawaii and the Pacific Basin and several other states too. And I'm based out of San Diego, California. So thank you for the invitation. And in brief, what's going on right now is we are working to share the data that have been collected to date with our partners for all the projects in Hawaii right now. The first image I'm going to show you here is for Kauaʻi. Kauaʻi is a QL1 and topobathy project. And this is showing the data that have been collected to date and are also being processed now. You can see that there are some higher elevations within Kauaʻi which were not captured due to the difficulty in obtaining the data and clouds and weather, etc. And at this time, though, the data that are not in white there have been processed or are being processed now for distribution to the partner, FEMA in this case, and also to be sent to USGS for review. I do not know the exact timeline of that. I believe it may be by the end of the year, but I'm not certain on that. I'm more certain on the next counties that I'll cover. Let me scroll down here to going to our Maui Oahu project. The same is going on with Oahu. The data that have been collected to date are being processed and will be shipped to the partners. There are several partners for Maui Oahu. And so you're seeing here approximately 70%, maybe 70+% of the island has been collected, and processing continues on that. At this time, there was no bathymetric data collected, so this is going to be topo only. And so this is being processed now. I'll give you some information on both Oahu and Maui here in a second when I show the final graphic. So this graphic's a bit incomplete, but I can fill in some of the gaps here. First of all, the data for Maui County has all been collected. It's not showing it complete there in the yellow graphic, yet it has all been collected. Data are being processed now for distribution to the partners. In concert with that, there are several yellow areas you can see on the Big Island. Those were recently collected, I believe, by the end of March this year, and are being processed now to be sent out along with the data for Maui and for Oahu. So that'll all be sent out at the same time to the project partners. In terms of a schedule for this, data will be sent out in two different groups. First, there will be a set of data to be sent for Maui County, except for the island of Maui itself. So the 3 other islands will be sent out to partners. Delivery by is estimated November 10th, okay, to all the partners and to USGS at the same time. Then we will have a delivery group 2. That will be the new areas of the Big Island that you can see there, Oahu, and then the island of Maui itself, which again is completed. And that will be sent out on approximately the 1st of December to all partners and to USGS too. So right now the vendor is still going through their processing to get all this in order and out the door. So it's subject to change, but I think the targeted dates at the moment look reasonable. So that's probably roughly what we're going to be seeing the data come across to everybody. And as need be, I may need to reach out to folks on addresses and shipping information as we get a little closer to the ship dates. So that's kind of really where we are with that data now. The area here in gray is earlier data that was released for the Big Island, and we've been chatting with folks about that, and still have some are looking at that data internally in terms of its further review at U.S. Geological Survey. I think we'll know a lot more about things as we get the rest of the state in and see kind of this as a whole. So I don't want to take up all your time. Any questions from anyone on this, or Joan, is there anything I'm missing here?
So is this the final data or the preliminary data?
This is called, we'll call it preliminary data.
Okay.
Okay, because we'll have some caveats on that, because none of the data will have gone through the review at USGS. So it will be considered a preliminary product.
And the final product is estimated to be available when for all of these data sets?
A very good question. I'm not certain, probably several months afterward.
And at that point, all of these data sets will be available likely on the USGS website and the NOAA website. Is that correct?
Yeah, it'll be available on the USGS website. It could be on the NOAA site as well.
Okay.
So
Those are
will
my
you
questions.
be releasing point clouds or DEMs, or what will the data look like?
Both of those are what we'll be releasing, the DEMs and the point clouds as the separate products. There'll also be ancillary data that will be released as well, such as the area of interest or the defined project area DPA, the tiling grids, the flight lines, information like that would be ancillary data. Project reports would be available too, and we'll post that on a different site. But most of the data will be on the national map site for download. It's typically available for download by tile. Okay, so there'll be a lot of tiles to download. We will have a 1 meter seamless DEM that will be downloadable by larger 10-kilometer cells, so or grid, I should say, tile, and that will be a little easier to download. We'll also have it posted on a site that was formerly FTP site, but now it acts as a HTTPS, so data can be downloaded there too. I hope that helps. I'll be able to send out links and could also host another call anytime to go over questions like that.
So for the DEM, will it be bare earth or will it include structures and vegetation?
The DEM will be bare earth. The point cloud data would have all of the points to include the ground as well as things above ground.
And for the DEMs, will they be hydrologically corrected or will they be uncorrected?
It will not be hydro corrected. It will be hydro flattened, meaning that larger hydrography features such as wider rivers and water bodies would be flattened so that the shoreline would be a consistent elevation that's done for cartographic purposes for USGS. But any further work in terms of hydro conditioning or hydro enforcement would not be done. That could be done though, and as part of future work.
I know the FEMA project is not yours, but I mean the Kauaʻi project, but that will be public as far as you know, but do we know where that might be available for download or?
Yes, that would be considered public as well. It would also be available from the same sites that the other data would be hosted on. The national map site, as well as we have another site called Lidar Explorer that will be on there. We also have the formerly FTP site where the data tiles or files will be. So it will share. It'll be on the same sites as the others.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much, Drew. Thanks for the update.
Okay, thank you. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime with questions.
Really appreciate you joining, Drew. Thank you so much.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to move to the discussion about pre-establishing AGOL groups. So this was my item, and it kind of came out of you know what? I apologize. I'm going to pause that for a second. I see that Pete Gehring from County of Maui is on the line. I totally missed you on the county updates. Do you have any updates from County of Maui?
Nope.
Okay.
I mean, that's a pretty broad question. I mean, if you have something more specific, I might be able to answer.
No, it just updates that would be of interest to the GIS folks on the call.
Just lots of wildfire response.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Pete. And that kind of brings me to the discussion that I want to initiate anyway about establishing AGOL groups. One of the things that from my perspective anyway, that I observed was that as early on in the wildfire response, or I guess as soon as FEMA got involved after the declaration, they were facilitating regular GIS coordination calls. And as part of that, people were sharing data or had data to be shared. And we were doing that. That was facilitated by setting up a couple of AGOL groups. And I know we're all using the Esri platform, so it was an easy place to share data and dashboards and apps and that kind of stuff. So I don't know, and I'm not in emergency management. Jonathan's on the call, so you folks may already be, or may already have plans for doing this, or templating that, or modeling that for future disasters, or disaster response. But I wanted to talk about that a little bit because it just made it, with respect to the wildfires, it just made it so easy for people to share their products. And then beyond that, we talked about setting up a hub or a site where maybe that content was organized a little more intuitively, or making some of those products easier to find. But at the base of it really is that ESRI group, that AGOL group. And I wanted to gauge just the if there's support for doing that, or if they're just hear from, I guess, the emergency management and or the GIS folks to see if that's already something you're doing. I know that the statewide program is not doing that. And again, Jonathan, you're on the call, so I don't know if HIEMA is already kind of pre-staging those groups. But I thought that was very useful and very really made sharing data and products very easy.
So to answer that question, not as of yet. I'm going to be trying to push our leadership to be able to do that. Thanks. That's it.
So Pete, you are on the call, but for the other counties, either the emergency management folks or the GIS folks, is that something you guys would support or are in support of? Again, it just made sharing of data and products easier for all the partners, at the federal level, the NGOs, the state folks, and I know County of Maui as well.
For,
go ahead. I was just going to say, yeah, it's been really helpful. Probably makes a lot of sense to stage something. I guess my question would be, who would manage the users? Because as people come and go from different organizations, the list of users would need to be updated in real time so that there's not a scramble. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Details to be worked out later if this is something that we want to pursue. But yeah, definitely, that's it.
For us over here, I think right now we do have Jim, who's heavily involved in our EOC, as well as doing the GIS for them. So I think he would probably be our best point of contact at this time. But I think we would support something like that too.
And to be clear, I think we're talking about statewide types of responses. Asia or Eric or Rob?
I think from Civil Defense for Hawaii County, we would be interested in kind of setting that up. I think Jonathan and I have a group that was shared from a long time ago, but to kind of maybe have just better defined groups, within the state and the counties would be really nice to have.
Yeah, and beyond just the logistics, beyond just setting up the technical aspects of it, I think, and Jonathan, you may be working on this already, just having that workflow in place, that playbook in place, that when something happens to a certain extent, then, you activate these groups or you contact these people, or, again, the details to be worked out, but conceptually, it just seemed to work really well from the statewide GIS program for the wildfires.
Yeah, sorry, Arthur, can I have one more thing that I forgot? Like when Mauna Loa erupted, we actually with HVO had a shared ArcGIS online group. Jonathan just reminded me of that. And that did work very well, although that group was set up like once the eruption started. So it was kind of, a scramble and maybe not set up quite the way it should have been. So some changes have been made after the fact, but I think having all of that in place before anything happens is a really good idea. So yeah, that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, it'd be great to learn a little bit more about that, and then maybe talk to Grayson from FEMA about the wildfire stuff. Maybe from that we can figure out where to go. But I just wanted to float that here, and then maybe get a larger group together of stakeholders to kind of work out some of the details. So okay, I'll do that. I think I got my answer. Thanks. And I'm bringing it up in this meeting, but we're not necessarily going to be the lead. I'm hoping that that Jonathan, you're successful in talking to your leadership. I do think it's more fitting for HIEMA coordination than the statewide program. Okay, thanks. And then the last thing, do we have time? We've got a few minutes, is just to follow up on that. We had a discussion several months ago about the National Address Database. It's an initiative, I think, from the federal side, but I know definitely from the NSGIC side, the National States Geographic Information Coordinating Council, sort of the national version of our HIGICC here. It's one of their national initiatives. But we started that discussion. One of the benefits to us as a statewide program is that we would have better addresses from which to create a more accurate geocoder. I want to follow up on that, but what I didn't get at the last discussion we had was who the appropriate people at the counties are. So I'm just bringing it up here because I'm going to reach out probably by email to the county folks to kind of get that list together, and then do some follow-up meetings after that. So I think that's it on my agenda. That was just a heads up. Anybody have anything else as we close out?
Arthur, just real quick, along the lines of, prepping before disasters, it might be good to have add to that discussion procedures for archiving GIS data after a response. There's been a lot of great products developed, to support Maui wildfires. I remember a lot of stuff was developed after the Kilauea response, and it would just hate to lose those to the sands of time. I mean, whether it's story maps, other types of things, where can that stuff, reside? There's a discussion about like keeping up with users that roll on and roll off. It's just a lot of these could be used as templates for future responses.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. That's a great point. It's funny, Joan, we were having this discussion with Esri, maybe in a different context, but archiving this online content and products is something that seems to be gaining more support from not just the state, but from other users as well. So I think Esri's looking into that. I don't have anybody from Esri on the call, but I think that's something that Esri, since we're all on the Esri platform, something they're looking at as well. And John, you reminded me, since you asked the question, are your slides going to be available? Can I share them with the group?
Yeah, we'll definitely push them over to you.
Okay. I'm gonna, this meeting was recorded, so I'm gonna upload it to our YouTube channel. I'll send a link out to everybody on the call. Anybody else? Anything else? Okay, if not, appreciate your all being here, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Arthur. Appreciate it.